we have a lucky moment here. Kingpins 24. We're getting to talk to somebody who's an expert in forced labor in cotton, and that's a hot subject today. And well, Patricia, if you could introduce yourself, I'd be grateful. But more than that, I want to thank you right away for doing this for us. We're thrilled to have you. And we consider this as an exceptional moment for our events that we do in general. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Andrew. I am Patricia Jurowitz. I am the founder of Responsible Sourcing Network. We're a project of an organization out of California called As You Sow. And I have been focused on forced labor in the cotton industry since about 2007, when I first became aware of forced labor and forced child labor in Uzbekistan. I am also the co-founder of the Cotton Campaign that has had a focus on forced labor in the cotton industries in Uzbekistan as well as Turkmenistan for that long. And we're now also paying attention to all of the forced labor problems in Xinjiang, China.
Marzia, do you want to please introduce yourself and then take it away?
Yeah, great. So some of you in the denim sector would know me as the Intelligence Director of Transformers Foundation, and some others that know me better know that I'm also the founder of Cotton Diaries, which is a global community of people that are passionate about cotton and want to make cotton supply chain more sustainable. So, and I'm honored to be here with Patricia and you, Andrew, the pillars of cotton. And I wanted to introduce this subject today so we say that cotton is a key ingredient in denim, right, Andrew? And some people may think that cotton controversial history of forced labor is a thing of the past, but actually it's not and remains a problem today. And as you said before, Patricia, you've been campaigning with the Responsible Sourcing Network for years now. And I wanted to ask you, why is forced labor so specifically related to cotton?
We all know that it has a very long history, especially in the United States, but there's still plenty of places in the world that are harvesting cotton by hand. So it's really in the hand harvesting that it's the biggest problem. With mechanized harvesting, it really brings the risk down to zero. And why is it hand harvested? I mean, it does give a lot of jobs to millions of farmers and their families around the world. And that's a great thing. You know, we want cotton to be able to provide livelihoods for people. And hand harvested cotton is high quality cotton. So it's unfortunate that it's not the really small farms with families, and it's not the really big farms that are all mechanized. A lot of it happens in those medium-sized farms because you need to pull the crop in very quickly. You kind of have to wait till it starts to get cold, but then you want to pick it before it starts raining or getting too cold. So you need a large volume of people in a very short amount of time. And I think that's another problem that or a situation that exists, which kind of makes it possible, creates the demand for exploitation of labor.
But I guess there's other crops affected by the same issues at similar levels. Is that right?
Sure. You know, there's forced labor in tobacco, palm oil, I mean, other industries besides agriculture, fishing, mining. So it's not exclusive to cotton, but that's very true. But there has been a history, and there's actually multiple countries that have actual documented evidence today of both forced labor and child labor.
Mm. And more recently, there's been a very big media attention on the issue of the Uyghur minority in China and related to cotton and forced labor. So can you explain a little bit to the audience what that implicates?
Sure. There's a lot of articles that really are focused on manufacturing facilities in Xinjiang. And a lot of it has to do with the people who are in detainment camps or re-education camps that are next to or within the same complex as spinning mills, textile mills that are spinning or weaving cotton products. So that's the, kind of what's a lot of the documentation and the articles have been focused more on that manufacturing side because the facilities are within or part of the, some refer to them as concentration camps and people having to work and being forced to work beyond their will. And a lot of the cotton coming into those facilities is grown in Xinjiang. Xinjiang's estimated to grow, I believe it's around 14% of the world's cotton industry, cotton production. And a lot of that cotton is being grown by kind of a paramilitary company called the XPCC. There's different types of exploitation that have been linked to the cotton production in Xinjiang. I mean, some of it is mechanized, the way it's harvested, but you have a lot of prisoners or former prisoners that have had to picket. You also have you have people brought from other places to harvest it from other parts of China. One of the most recent exploitations have been with the women, the mothers and the wives of people who are now in the detainment camps, and the threat of being detained if they don't go and harvest the cotton. So there's a couple of different types. There's also been, it was called work study, was another way of children being forced to go and pick cotton. So there has been, it's both a history of forced labor in the Xinjiang area, as well as kind of an evolving approach to the type of exploitation that's happening there.
Right. And how are companies, how are governments reacting to this issue?
Well, I think that a lot of folks inside companies, at least those following government regulations, know that there's been a there's been a call to prevent cotton or cotton products from Xinjiang from being imported into the United States. There's something called WROs, or withhold release orders, which are managed by the Customs and Border Protection Agency of the US government. And there are several companies on that list that there has been enough evidence demonstrating that those companies do produce their products with forced labor, and therefore they cannot be imported into the United States using an old law 1307 that says that any product produced with slave labor or forced labor is not allowed to be imported into the United States. Currently, there's a WRO on cotton and cotton products from Turkmenistan because of the ubiquitous exploitation and forced labor utilized in the Turkmenistan harvest, that they kind of have a blanket ban, so to speak, even though they don't call it a ban, but it's basically a ban of bringing any Turkmenistan product manufactured with cotton into the United States. So that ban, that kind of like blanket WRO, does not currently exist for Xinjiang. Right now it specifically names a couple of different companies, but there is a call for that to happen. And the US Congress did pass an act just a couple of weeks ago that says that this issue needs to be looked into, and they specifically name tomatoes and cotton to look into it to decide if that type of ban should exist or not.
I have a question. Is this a political Democrat-Republican thing, or is it something they both agree on?
No, it's definitely across the board. I think only three Congress people, members of Congress, did not vote for it. Other than that, it was 400 and whatever, I think, all voted for it. So it's definitely an issue that goes across the board.
Interesting.
And so you talked quite a bit about the US government, but what about the brands? What about certifications? What about standards? How is the cotton ecosystem and the sustainability ecosystem around cotton responding to it?
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting. I think there's a lot of anxiety on the parts of brands and retailers, the importers
Here?
on record. I mean, Europe, I'm not quite as familiar with all the European, requirements are for European imports, though I know that there's definitely a lot of talk around this issue in the UK and potential activities and actions there. In Europe, you have more of the human rights due diligence discussions happening, but UK also has its modern slavery acts. So does Australia, California. So it's all kind of intertwined in this concept of brands and retailers understanding the risks in their supply chain, risk of harm, especially on forced labor, and taking action to address it. And I think that a lot of brands and retailers do look toward the memberships of the associations that they're part of, whether that be the Ethical Trade Initiative or Better Cotton Initiative. There's a different group, Sustainable Apparel Coalition. What are they doing? And looking to these initiatives to help them identify and then address the risks. Right. But I've talked to BCI about this, and, they're not set up to be a risk mitigation entity for their members. Right. They have more of a continuous improvement approach, and they want to help farmers do better, which is great, but then the brands need to be careful and really understand how BCI works, and maybe BCI is or isn't actually offering the type of protections for them that they need or are looking for.
Let me ask a question.
Yeah.
If BCI, the name is Better Cotton Initiative, so one assumes they know what's going on to make a judgment that it's better cotton. And how would they not know in advance that this was forced labor?
Yeah, there's some really great articles on Apparel Insider that kind of dig into the issue of forced labor in Xinjiang over the decades. And it's interesting that ex-PCC, that now you have sanctions against that company by the US, that used to be one of the implementing partners for Better Cotton Initiative. And that they've been doing a lot of capacity building as well with smallholder farmers there. But recently, I think it was in March, is about when BCI, Better Cotton Initiative, did make the decision to stop its licensing of Better Cotton in Xinjiang for the 2021 season.
Mm. Right, and
and maybe I should just, we can come back to this, but the other thing I'd say is that, so even though BCI isn't licensing in Xinjiang, it still is doing licensing other Better Cotton in other parts of China, right? And also, to me, that could be a little bit, well, it's something to pay attention to make sure that if that cotton's coming from other parts of China and it's Better Cotton, and I know a lot of brands, and probably a lot of brands watching this are members of Better Cotton Initiative and have 100% sustainability goals that they have achieved or are looking or about to achieve, which could be a combination of organic, Better Cotton, cotton made in Africa, fair trade, which is all great, because I think all those initiatives are really good, or at least helping make sure that the whole industry is as sustainable as possible. But BCI, what they don't require is that they don't trace that the better cotton, the licensed better cotton, is actually being processed at the spinning mills and going into the product of brands who are better cotton members, because they have a mass balance system. And basically that says that if there's a trader or other intermediary after the gin, the gin gins the cotton, the gin has 100% better cotton bales, they ship bales. But those bales may or may not actually arrive at the spinning mill because they could be substituted for non-better cotton. And as long as they're coming from the same country of origin, and as long as those traders are not processing or passing on more better cotton claim units than they purchase of better cotton. So to me, that's the biggest risk for brands who are still manufacturing in China, that they could have Xinjiang cotton in their product that's substituted for better cotton coming from another part of China. And so personally, I mean, I've had multiple conversations with BCI, and one of my messages to them has been, in high-risk countries like China right now, like Uzbekistan, you know, at some point, if you're able to produce responsible cotton there, trace that cotton to spinning mill. You don't necessarily have to trace it beyond spinning mill, but at least know that if it's licensed better cotton, you know that has been produced responsibly. That's what you should then follow the trail. You know, it doesn't have to be segregated traceability all the way through, like organic, which is really expensive, but at least make sure that's the cotton that ends up at the spinning mill and is going into product and is not being substituted for cotton harvested with a high risk of forced labor.
And Patricia, on this point, I'm really excited actually to talk about it, because I know that you propose with the YES program an approach that is different, that is based on due diligence. Could you explain a little bit more about what you're doing with RSN and YES? So RSNs are responsible sourcing. I use acronyms.
That's I do too. It's a long name, but I like the acronym YES, YESS, yarn ethically and sustainably sourced, because it's a very positive word, has an extra S, and it's something that I researched, and then we developed a standard in 2019 and an assessment workbook that is based on OECD's due diligence guidance for responsible supply chains for apparel and footwear. And it also kind of follows what's been done for conflict minerals from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where companies had to know that the minerals in their electronics and other products were not contributing to the conflict in the DRC. So, and it's been a very successful program, and I was involved with helping to get that set up. So it's like, well, we could do that for cotton as well. And the idea is that looking at where cotton is harvested with a high risk of forced labor, we're only focusing on forced labor right now. At some other point, we could focus on child labor, but it's due diligence of your materials management. So it's looking at that raw material cotton, raw virgin cotton coming into your facility. Into the facility of the spinning mill, because we know traceability to country of origin or to farm is lost at spinning mill, because spinners typically blend together cotton from many different places to get the quality they want and minimize costs and all of that with various characteristics. So if you can ensure that the cotton coming into the warehouse is all either low risk, you know, or if it's coming from a high risk region, that it's through a system like Better Cotton or Cotton Made in Africa, et cetera. It could be, you know, Olam could have its own program, as long as it's a credible program, which we'd have to, you know, make sure that the programs at the farm level are credible. But then it actually demonstrates best practice, that you can source from a high risk region and you're rewarding good practice, even in an environment that's of higher risk. So going back to the previous point about cotton being harvested in other parts of China, that's why I think it's so important to be able to demonstrate that if you're sourcing cotton from China, you can show that it's not coming from Xinjiang, and therefore it's low risk, or, you know, is it better cotton, for example?
But can't companies like associations that verify origin and like for instance, that work with organic cotton verify that it's not from Xinjiang? Or, I mean, I would think that if they can do that with organic, they should be able to do that with conventional cotton as well.
Yeah, there's, I mean, are you talking about like the ortains and some of the technologies that are fingerprinting cotton?
That's one area, but the other area would be companies like Control Union that take care of chain of custody. They should be able to handle that, don't you think?
Well, all bales of cotton have ID numbers on them, right? You know the lot, you know the GIN number. So if you know the GIN number, then you're going to know. I mean, the farms are always within a certain radius of the GIN. So you could look at any paperwork and actually know pretty quick. If you have the bale list that's part of the bill of lading at the facility, at the spinning mill, you're going to know the origin of that cotton. So, and that's how YES works. Actually, it looks at you know, doing an overall risk assessment of where the spinning mill source is, what are all the origins of its cotton. And then for the higher risk regions, as I mentioned, we've actually identified 9 countries that have high risk of forced labor. Then you have to demonstrate that it's coming through one of these other systems that implements further due diligence to ensure that it's not harvested with forced labor. And you can cross check the documentation against import permits and bills of lading, invoices, etc. And so but it's also part of empowering spinners. You want them to have policies against forced labor. You want them to have to know your counterparty. Who are they buying from? Who are all their suppliers? And you just do a sampling of documentation then to make sure that they actually have management systems to manage risk in their own supply chains.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want one last question before we run out of time. And I want to say, what can we ask from brands, from spinner, from like the audience that is watching us, like to do? What do they need to do in order to make sure that forced labor is not in their supply chain? If they were like, or where can they look?
Well, you can come to our website, sourcingnetwork.org, and specifically look at cotton, or even on our homepage, we have a link to YES, Y-E-S-S. But what we're asking about first is that companies map their supply chains so that, you know, they look at your, if you know who your textile mills are, great. If you don't know who all the textile mills are, you should start to identify them. And we're also working out some basic questionnaire right now that the textile mills that you could ask questions to your textile mills about their own processes and having them identify spinning mills. So we developed the YES standard and workbook. We're in the process of piloting it. We're still looking for a couple of brands or retailers to partner with us to pilot that system. We're also looking to adapt it to the textile mills so that you could also make sure that textile mills aren't using any yarn, you know, of high risk coming from Xinjiang or of high risk forced labor. And doing this as an industry together is going to be a lot more efficient and cost effective than every brand having to go out and have their spinning mills audited. You know, that's the idea of YES, is that we do one audit a year and that everybody has access to it. But so that's where I would start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're running out of time.
Sorry.
To you forever, I think. It's so interesting. But yeah, thank you so much.
We'll be back at you for sure.
Okay, sounds great. Be happy to talk with y'all.
Bye, Patricia.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.